Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where threads hum with secrets and a single loom can defy the gods. Picture yourself in a dusty Greek village, the air thick with olive blossom scent, where every clack of a loom feels like a heartbeat. You're strolling through a sunlit agora, merchants shouting, kids dodging underfoot, and there's this girl, Arachne, whose weaving makes everyone stop and stare. Her fingers dance like they're possessed, turning wool into stories that could make you forget your own name. But here's the reality check: in a world where gods are petty and pride is a death sentence, you probably won't survive this tale unscathed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the heart of Arachne's village, a place called Hypepa, tucked in the rolling hills of ancient Lydia. It's not exactly Times Square, think more like a sleepy farmer's market with a side of divine gossip. The year, well, let's just say it's so far back that your smartphone would be a fancy paperweight. The sun's dipping low, painting the mud brick houses in shades of amber, and you're weaving through a crowd that smells faintly of sweat and fresh baked bread. Donkeys bray, a potter's wheel hums, and somewhere a loom clacks rhythmically. That's Arachne's loom, the one everyone's whispering about. You catch snippets of chatter. She's better than her mother. No mortal weaves like that, and oh, here's a good one. Bet she could outspin Athena herself. Bold words, right? You smirk, knowing that kind of talk is like waving a red flag at a particularly cranky goddess. Hypepa's no backwater, it's a hub for weavers, and Arachne's the star. You push closer to her family's workshop, a squat building with a sagging roof. Inside, it's chaos bolts of wool in every color, skeins dangling like rainbow vines, and Arachne, barely out of her teens, hunched over her loom. Her hands move so fast they blur like she's conducting some ancient orchestra. You lean in, catching the faint squeak of wooden pegs and the whisper of thread sliding through warp. She's weaving a scene, a hunt maybe, with deer leaping through a forest so vivid you swear you hear hooves. You're not the only one gawking. A cluster of villagers hovers nearby, their eyes wide. One guy, a tanner, with hands like leather, mutters, "That's no mortal skill." You raise an eyebrow. "Careful, buddy, the gods have ears." Let's talk facts for a sec. Weaving in ancient Greece wasn't just a craft, it was a cornerstone of society. Women from peasants to nobles spun and wove to clothe their families, and the best weavers were local celebrities. Hypepa, known for its textiles, was a real place mentioned in texts like Strabo's Geography, a hub where wool and linen turned into wealth. Arachne's talent isn't just a cute hobby, it's her ticket to status in a world where women's power was often tied to their looms. But here's the quirky bit: some ancient sources like Pliny's Natural History hint that Lydian weavers used dyes from crushed bugs, yep, squashed insects for that vibrant red. Imagine Arachne flicking bug juice onto her threads, chuckling at the mess. Gross but effective. You're still watching her, aren't you? Her loom's a simple thing: wooden frame, taut, warp threads, a shuttle darting like a minnow. But the way she works it, pure magic. The villagers say her mother taught her the basics, but Arachne's long surpassed her. You overhear a girl whisper to her friend, "She learned from the nymphs, I swear." You stifle a laugh. Nymphs. Really, that's the kind of wild rumor that spreads when someone's too good. Historians still argue whether Arachne was a real person or a myth spun to warn against hubris. Some say she's a stand-in for Lydia's weaving culture. Others think she's pure fiction, a cautionary tale. Either way, you feel the weight of her story settling over you like dust. You wander closer, dodging a stray goat that's nibbling someone's sandal. Arachne doesn't look up, but you notice her lips twitching like she's holding back a grin. She knows they're watching. She knows they're talking. And here's the thing, she loves it. You can see it in the way she flicks her wrist, making the loom sing. A kid nearby tugs his mom's chiton and asks, "Can she weave the stars?" The mom shushes him, but you're wondering the same thing. Her latest piece, a tapestry of a river god lounging by a stream, looks so real you half expect it to ripple. You're tempted to touch it, but the tanner glares like you're about to ruin a masterpiece. Fair enough. Let's pause for a joke. Why did Arachne's loom never break? Because it was too threadful to fail. Okay, you're rolling your eyes, but you're still here, right? You glance around the workshop, noticing the cluttered clay jars of dye, a half-eaten fig on a stool, a cat napping in a pile of wool. It's cozy lived in, but there's a tension in the air. The villagers' whispers are getting louder, and you catch the word Athena again. You know the goddess of wisdom and crafts isn't exactly chill about mortals outshining her. Remember that time she turned Medusa's hair into snakes for less? Yeah, you're starting to get why Arachne's bravado feels like a tightrope walk. You step outside the evening air, cooling your skin. The village is alive with torchlight now, shadows dancing on the walls. You hear a lyre strumming somewhere, and it mixes with the distant clack of Arachne's loom. She's still at it working late, her silhouette framed in the workshop's glow. You wonder what drives her pride, passion, or just the thrill of being the best. Whatever it is, it's drawing a crowd, and not all of them are friendly. A priestess in a white robe passes by, muttering about mortals who tempt fate. You shiver not because it's cold, but because you know where this is heading. Arachne's not just weaving cloth. She's weaving a story that's about to unravel her world. You linger by the workshop door, catching one last glimpse of her. She's humming now, a soft tune that feels older than the hills. Her tapestry's almost done, and you can't help but feel like you're witnessing something big, something that'll echo beyond this village. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see what happens when a mortal girl dares to challenge a goddess? Stick around because this is only the beginning, and trust me, it gets wilder from here. You're back in Hipepa, the village still buzzing with that golden hour glow, but now your focus is razor sharp on Arachne, her loom practically singing under her fingers. The clack-clack of her shuttle is like a metronome pulling you deeper into her world. You're standing just outside her workshop, the air thick with the scent of wool and something sharper, maybe ambition. Arachne's not just weaving. She's rewriting what's possible, and the whole village knows it. You can feel the weight of their stares, half awe, half fear, as she crafts tapestries that make their jaws drop. She's young, maybe 17, with calloused hands and eyes that glint like she's in on a secret, and you're starting to suspect she's weaving her way into trouble, bigger than this dusty little town can hold. You step inside, dodging a low beam in the workshop's sagging roof. The place is a riot of color skeins of crimson, indigo, and saffron hang like a painter's fever dream. Arachne's at her loom, her movements so fluid it's like she's dancing with the threads. You squint at her latest work, a tapestry of a nymph, outrunning a satyr, the scene so vivid you swear you hear the nymph's laughter. The villagers crowding around whisper things like, "She's too good, and no one weaves like that without help." Help, you smirk, help from who? The gods, the nymphs, or maybe just raw, stubborn talent. You're not sure, but you're hooked, leaning closer to catch every flick of her wrist. Let's ground this in a fact: weaving wasn't just art in ancient Greece, it was survival. Textiles were currency status, even offerings to the gods. A good weaver like Arachne could trade her work for grain wine or a better life. Her skills putting Hypepa on the map, drawing traders from as far as Ephesus. But here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient texts like those from the poet Ovid suggest weavers like Arachne might have used loom weights carved with tiny prayers to Athena. Ironic, right? Asking the goddess of crafts for help while outshining her. You glance at Arachne's loom. Sure enough, there's a clay weight dangling etched with something you can't quite read. Probably not. Dear Athena, please don't smite me. You're still watching her, aren't you? She's weaving a new scene now. A storm at sea, waves crashing so real. You feel salt on your lips. A kid nearby tugs your sleeve and whispers, "She made a horse gallop last week." You chuckle. "Okay, kid. Sure she did." But then you look again and damn, those waves do seem to move. Arachne's got this smirk like she knows exactly how good she is. You catch a villager muttering, "She's better than Athena." There it is again, that dangerous whisper. You want to nudge the guy and say, "Mate, maybe keep that on the down low, because gods don't play nice when mortals get cocky." Remember that time Athena turned some poor sap into a stag just for boasting? Yeah, not a great career move. You wander to the back of the workshop where a half-finished tapestry leans against the wall. It's a mess of threads, but even that looks deliberate, like Arachne's chaos is art in itself. You're starting to get why the villagers are obsessed. She's not just making cloth. She's telling stories, stories that make you feel alive. Stories that make you forget the world outside. But there's a shadow creeping in. You overhear a weaver, her hands stained with dye, hiss to her friend, "She's too proud. It'll end badly." You raise an eyebrow. Prophetic much, historians still argue whether Arachne's story is about hubris or just a mortal caught in a divine power trip. Was she too cocky or was Athena too petty? You're not sure, but you feel the tension building like a storm cloud over Hypepa. Joke time. Why did Arachne keep weaving late? Because she was spun into her work. You groan, but you're still here, right? You notice a stray thread on the floor, bright blue, and you're tempted to pick it up like it's a piece of her magic. The workshop's getting crowded now. Merchants, neighbors, even a stray dog sniffing around. Arachne doesn't flinch. She's in her zone, her loom, a battlefield, where she's the undisputed queen. You spot an old woman in the corner, her eyes sharp as she watches Arachne. "She's weaving her own fate," the woman mutters. You shiver. Okay, cryptic grandma, tone it down. But you can't shake the feeling she's onto something. You step outside for a breather, the village now draped in twilight. Torches flicker, casting shadows that dance like Arachne's threads. You hear her loom, still going relentless, like she's racing against something bigger than herself. The air's cooler now, but it's heavy with whispers. Athena's name keeps coming up, and not in a good way. You glance back at the workshop where Arachne's silhouette glows against the lamplight. She's not slowing down, not even for a second. You wonder if she knows the rumors, if she hears the villagers betting on her downfall. Probably. She seems like the type to lean into it, to double down just to prove she can. Let's have another joke. What do you call Arachne's best tapestry? A web of genius, okay. You're not laughing, but you're still with me, aren't you? You're back inside now, squeezing past a burly trader who smells like olives and regret. Arachne's weaving a new detail, a starlit sky, threads of silver glinting like real stars. You're mesmerized, but there's this nagging feeling like you're watching Icarus climb too high. The villagers' chatters louder now, and you catch a new word: challenge. Someone saying Arachne claims she could outweave Athena herself. You freeze? Did she really say that? Or is this just village gossip gone wild? Either way, it's like someone lit a match in a room full of dynamite. You linger by the door, the night air creeping in. The village is quieter now, but Arachne's loom keeps its rhythm steady as a pulse. You can't help but admire her. She's all in, no apologies, no fear. But you know how these stories go. Mortals who shine too bright tend to get burned. You're starting to feel it, that pull of her story, like a thread you can't let go of. She's not just a weaver. She's a spark, and Hipepa's about to catch fire. You're ready to see what happens next, aren't you? Because trust me, this is where things get messy. You're still in Hipepa, the village humming with its usual chaos, but now there's a new edge in the air, like static before a storm. You're leaning against a sun-warmed wall. Near Arachne's workshop, the clack of her loom, a distant heartbeat. The gossip's gotten louder. Her name's on everyone's lips, but so is Athena's. You can almost feel the goddess's presence, like a shadow flickering at the edge of your vision. Arachne's skill isn't just talk anymore. It's a challenge, a dare that's starting to feel like a declaration of war. You're drawn back inside, curious to see if she's as fearless as the rumors say, or if she's just a girl caught up in her own legend. Inside the workshop's a whirlwind of color and motion. Arachne's at her loom, her fingers flying, weaving a scene so vivid it makes your head spin, a golden chariot racing across a sky of indigo threads. You squint, catching details, the horse's manes ripple, the driver's eyes glint with fire. It's unreal, like she's stolen a piece of the heavens. The crowd's thicker today, villagers elbowing for a better view. A baker with flour-dusted hands whispers, "She's tempting the gods." You nod, half agreeing, because you know Athena's not exactly known for her chill vibe. Remember how she cursed Medusa for less? Yeah, you're starting to see a pattern. Let's anchor this with a fact. Athena, goddess of wisdom and crafts, was a big deal in ancient Greece, worshipped as the patron of weaving and strategy. Temples like the Parthenon were built in her honor, and her cult was no joke. Think offerings of olive oil and, yes, finely woven cloth. But here's the quirky bit. Some ancient texts like Hesiod's Theogony hint that Athena's weaving skills were tied to her role as a war goddess, her loom a metaphor for battle plans. So when Arachne's out here weaving tapestries that could make a goddess jealous, it's not just about art, it's like she's throwing punches in Athena's domain. You glance at Arachne's loom, wondering if she knows she's playing with fire. You edge closer, dodging a kid who's tossing pebbles at a stray cat. Arachne's not slowing down, her shuttle darting like a wasp. She's working on a new detail now, a storm cloud splitting the chariot's path, threads of silver and gray, swirling like they're alive. You swear you hear thunder in the clack of her loom. A merchant nearby mutters, "She said she's better than Athena herself." You freeze, okay? That's not just gossip. That's a direct hit. You want to grab Arachne and whisper, "Girl, maybe dial it back," but she's got this look, half smirk, half defiance, like she's daring the universe to prove her wrong. You're impressed, but also like, yikes. Joke break. Why is Arachne so confident? Because her threads are so legit. You roll your eyes, but you're still glued to her work, aren't you? The villagers are eating it up too, but there's a nervous edge now. An old man with a limp, probably a retired weaver, shakes his head and says, "Pride like that calls down thunder." You nod, feeling the weight of his words. Historians still argue whether Athena's wrath in this story is about divine justice or just a goddess throwing a tantrum. Was Arachne's boast a crime, or was Athena overreacting? You're not sure, but you can feel the goddess's gaze like a prickle on your neck. You wander to the side of the workshop where a stack of Arachne's older tapestries leans against the wall. One catches your eye, the scene of a festival, with dancers so lively you almost hear their laughter. You reach out, then stop remembering the tanner's glare from last time. These aren't just fabrics. They're stories, each thread a choice Arachne made to stand out. You overhear a woman say she learned from the muses, not nymphs. You chuckle. Okay, the rumors are getting wilder. First nymphs, now muses. Next they'll say she's weaving with Apollo's lyre strings. But you get it. Her work feels otherworldly, like she's tapped into something bigger than Hypepa. The air shifts and you notice a new face in the crowd. A woman in a hooded cloak, her eyes sharp as flint. She's watching Arachne with an intensity that makes your skin crawl. Nobody else seems to notice her, but you can't shake the feeling she's not just another villager. You blink and she's gone, like she melted into the shadows. Okay, creepy. You're starting to wonder if Athena's already here, scoping out her rival. You glance at Arachne, who's still weaving oblivious to the storm brewing. Her latest piece is nearly done, the chariot now soaring above a mountain threads of gold, catching the lamplight like fire. Another joke to lighten the mood. What's Arachne's loom made of thread-eum steel? You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You step outside for a second, the village now cloaked in dusk. Torches cast flickering light, and the air smells of smoke and roasted figs. You hear Arachne's loom, steady as ever, but the whispers around you are darker now. She's gone too far, a potter says, his hands caked with clay. Athena won't stand for it. You want to shrug it off, but you can't. The goddess's pride is legendary, and Arachne's not exactly subtle about her skills. You lean against the workshop wall, the stone cool against your back. The village feels smaller now, like it's holding its breath. Arachne's loom is the only sound cutting through the night, a defiant rhythm that says she's not backing down. You're starting to admire her guts, but there's a knot in your stomach. You know how these myths go, mortals who shine too bright don't get happy endings. You glance back inside where Arachne's silhouette glows against the lamplight, her hands still moving, her story still unfolding. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how far this defiance takes her? Because trust me, the stage is set and the gods are watching. You're standing in the heart of Hypepa's agora, the marketplace alive with the clamor of merchants hawking olives in clay pots. But all eyes are drifting toward Arachne's workshop. The air's thick with dust and anticipation, like the village knows something big's about to go down. You can still hear her loom's steady clack, but now it's drowned out by a new buzz, rumors that Arachne's not just boasting, but outright challenging Athena to a weaving duel. You feel the tension like a thread pulled too tight, ready to snap. Everyone's talking about it, from the fishmonger to the kids kicking stones in the dirt. You're drawn back to her workshop, curious to see if Arachne's as bold as they say, or if this is just village gossip spinning out of control. You squeeze through the crowd, the scent of fresh bread and sweat hitting you as you near the workshop door. Inside, Arachne's at her loom, her face calm but her eyes blazing with something fierce. She's weaving a scene of a golden city, towers gleaming, like they're lit from within. The crowd's bigger today, packed so tight, you're elbow to elbow with a shepherd who smells like wool and regret. She said it yesterday, he mutters. Said her hands are steadier than Athena's. You raise an eyebrow. Okay, Arachne. That's not just confidence. That's a cosmic level flex. You're half impressed, half terrified, because you know gods don't take kindly to mortals throwing shade. Let's drop a fact. In ancient Greece, public challenges like this weren't just bold. They were a cultural staple. Think of them like the Olympics of trash talk, where poets and athletes would face off to prove their worth. Arachne's claim, if true, fits this vibe, turning her loom into a stage for mortal divine drama. But here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient sources, like fragments from lost Greek plays, suggest weavers sometimes held public weave-offs to settle disputes with crowds betting on the winner. Imagine Arachne's challenge as the ancient equivalent of a rap battle, only with shuttles instead of mics. You glance at her loom, wondering if she's prepping for the showdown of the century. You edge closer, catching the glint of her shuttle as it darts through the warp. Her tapestry's unreal walls of that golden city shimmer, and you swear you see tiny figures moving in the streets. A woman nearby gasps. It's like she's weaving life itself. You nod, but you're distracted by the whispers. Athena's coming. A potter says, his hands trembling. She heard the challenge. You want to laugh, come on a goddess, showing up in Hypepa. But then you remember that hooded woman from last night. Her flint-sharp eyes, and your stomach twists. Was that Athena? You're not sure, but the air feels heavier, like the goddess's presence is pressing down on the village. Joke time, why's Arachne so bold? Her loom's got more warp than a spaceship, you smirk, but the crowd's too tense to laugh. You overhear a girl say she's weaving her own doom. Ouch, dramatic much. But you get it. Arachne's not backing down, and the villagers are starting to split. Some cheer her on, calling her a genius. Others mutter about hubris, saying she's cursed the whole town. Historians still argue whether Arachne's challenge was a real event or a myth to warn against pride. Did she actually throw down with Athena, or is this just a story to keep mortals in line? You're not sure, but you feel the stakes rising like a storm brewing over the hills. You wander to the back of the workshop where Arachne's older tapestries hang like trophies. One shows a lion hunt, the beast's eyes so fierce. You step back. You're tempted to touch it, but a kid nearby hisses, "Don't, it's sacred sacred." You raise an eyebrow. Since when is Arachne's work holy? But you get the vibe, her TAP 600 estries are more than cloth. They're power defiance art. You notice a new face in the crowd, a young man with a lyre. His fingers twitching like he's itching to play. She's a muse in mortal skin, he says to no one in particular. You chuckle, okay buddy, lay off the wine. But you can't deny her work feels like it's touched by something bigger. You step outside the agora, buzzing louder now. Merchants are taking bets, actual bets, on whether Arachne can outweave a goddess. You overhear odds 2 amphorae of wine says Athena smites her. A sack of barley says Arachne wins. You shake your head. Only in Hypepa would people bet on a mortal's chances against a deity. The sun's high now, bleaching the dirt streets white, and you feel sweat prickling your neck. The village feels like a powder keg, and Arachne's loom is the spark. You glance back at the workshop where her silhouette still moves against the lamplight, steady as ever. She's not slowing down, not even with the whispers of Athena's arrival. Another joke to break the tension. What's Arachne's secret weapon? A thread mendus ego. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You lean against a stall, the vendor offering you a fig. You politely decline. The crowd's growing, and you spot that hooded woman again lingering at the edge of the agora. She's watching silent, her cloak blending into the shadows. Your heart skips. Okay, that's definitely not normal. You're starting to think Athena's not just coming. She's already here, sizing up her rival. You want to warn Arachne, but she's lost in her work, her loom's rhythm like a war drum. You drift back toward the workshop, the crowd parting like they know you're invested now. Arachne's tapestry is nearly done, the golden city now framed by a twilight sky, stars winking in silver thread. You're mesmerized, but there's a knot in your chest. The villagers' whispers are a chorus now. Athena's coming. She'll crush her. Arachne's unstoppable. You're not sure who to root for, a mortal girl with guts or a goddess who doesn't lose. But you know one thing, this showdown's about to change everything. and you're right in the middle of it, hooked on every thread Arachne weaves. You're in Hypepa's agora, the air crackling with anticipation, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. The marketplace is a mess of noise, merchants shouting, donkeys braying. But it's all background static to the real show. Arachne's challenge to Athena has gone from whisper to war cry. You can't tear yourself away from her workshop where the crowd's so thick, it's like trying to breathe in a sardine can. The clack of her loom is relentless, a rhythm that says she's not backing down even as the village buzzes with talk of a divine showdown. You're itching to see it unfold, to watch Arachne and Athena face off their looms like weapons in a duel that could burn Hypepa to the ground. You push through the crowd, the scent of olive oil and dust clinging to your skin. Inside the workshop, Arachne's at her loom, her face a mask of focus, but there's a glint in her eye. Defiance, maybe, or just pure thrill. She's weaving something new, a tapestry of a raging sea waves crashing so vividly you feel the spray. The crowd's buzzing, but it's not just awe anymore. There's fear, like they know the gods are watching. A woman with a basket of figs whispers, "Athena's here." I saw her. You glance around, half expecting that hooded figure from before, but there's just villagers, their eyes darting like they're waiting for the sky to crack open. Let's ground this with a fact. In ancient Greek culture, contests like this weren't just for bragging rights, they were sacred. Think of the poetic duels at festivals, or the athletic games at Olympia. Public displays of skill were how you proved your worth, sometimes even to the gods. Arachne's challenge fits this mold, but it's next level risky, like challenging a CEO to a boardroom showdown. And here's the quirky bit. Some ancient sources like Ovid's Metamorphoses describe weavers preparing for contests by fasting or praying to Athena for luck. Ironic, right? Arachne's probably not praying though. You catch her smirking as she weaves like she's already won. You edge closer, dodging a kid who's waving a stick like it's a sword. Arachne's tapestry is unreal ships tossed on those woven waves, sailors' faces etched with panic. You swear you hear their shouts. A merchant nudges you, his breath reeking of garlic. "She's weaving the gods' secrets," he says. You raise an eyebrow. Okay, dramatic, but you're starting to wonder. Her work feels like it's taunting someone or something bigger than Hypepa. Then it happens, the crowd parts, and there's that hooded woman again stepping forward. Her cloak falls back, revealing a face too perfect, too sharp, like a statue come to life. You freeze Athena. The villagers gasp, some dropping to their knees. Arachne doesn't look up, but her shuttle slows just for a second. Joke break, why is Athena so mad? Her loom's got no weave room. You chuckle, but the air's too tense for laughs. Athena's voice cuts through, calm but cold, like a blade on stone. You claim to surpass me. Mortal Arachne finally looks up, her eyes locking with the goddesses. I claim the truth, she says. And you're like, whoa girl, maybe pump the brakes. The crowd's silent now, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Historians still argue whether this moment was Arachne's hubris or Athena's insecurity. Was the goddess defending her honor or just flexing her power? You're not sure, but you feel the clash coming like two storms meeting over the sea. Athena steps closer, her presence filling the room like a sudden frost. She's not in armor, just a simple chiton, but you feel her power, like static crawling up your arms. Prove it, she says, gesturing to a second loom in the corner, untouched, like it's been waiting for this. Arachne doesn't flinch. She nods her jaw tight. You're impressed. She's either fearless or completely unhinged. The villagers start murmuring, bets flying again. A jug of wine says Arachne's done for. A goat says she'll hold her own. You want to tell them to shut up because this isn't a game anymore. It's a duel, and the stakes are higher than Hipepa's ever seen. You glance at Arachne's loom, where the sea tapestry's almost done, waves curling like they're about to spill out. Athena's already at the other loom, her hands moving with a precision that's almost terrifying. You're caught between them, mortal and goddess, their shuttles darting like swords. Another joke to ease the tension. What's the contest's prize? A thread-tastic ego boost. You're not laughing, but you're glued to the scene. The crowd split, some cheer for Arachne. Others pray to Athena, their whispers a chaotic hum. You spot that old woman from before her eyes, gleaming like she's seen this coming. Fate's weaving now, she mutters. You shiver because she's not wrong. The looms are a symphony of clacks, Arachne's fast and fierce, Athena's steady and cold. You can't see the goddess's work yet, but Arachne's sea is taking shape. Sirens now, their faces haunting their songs, almost audible. You're mesmerized, but there's a knot in your chest. This isn't just about skill. It's about pride power and who gets to tell the story. You notice a stray thread on the floor, crimson like a drop of blood. You're tempted to pick it up, but you don't. Something tells you it's part of this moment, part of the clash. The air's electric, the villagers holding their breath, and you're right there with them, waiting to see whose loom will sing louder. You step back the workshop, feeling smaller, like the walls are closing in. Outside, the agora's gone quiet, the whole village sensing the showdown. You glance at Athena, her face unreadable, then at Arachne, her smirk still there, but tighter now. The looms keep going, threads flying, and you know this is it, the moment where everything changes. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see what these two create and what it'll cost, because, trust me, this duel's about to weave a story nobody in Hypaepa will forget. You're rooted in Arachne's workshop, the air so thick with tension you could slice it with a loom's shuttle. The crowd's a breathless mass, eyes darting between Arachne and Athena, their looms dueling in a symphony of clacks and whispers. Hipepa's agora outside is eerily silent, like the village is holding its breath for this mortal versus goddess showdown. You're close enough to smell the wool and feel the heat of the oil lamps, your heart pounding as you watch Arachne pour her soul into her tapestry. She's not just weaving, she's telling a story that feels like a rebellion, and Athena's loom answers with a precision that's almost cruel. You're caught in the middle, mesmerized by the threads that could rewrite Arachne's fate. Arachne's tapestry is taking shape, and it's bold, too bold. You squint, catching scenes of gods behaving badly. Zeus as a swan tricking a mortal. Poseidon storms, drowning sailors for sport. Her threads are vivid crimson and gold, each stitch a jab at divine pride. You're stunned, she's not just showing skill. She's exposing the gods' flaws like she's daring Athena to look. The crowd murmurs, some in awe, others in horror. A weaver nearby whispers, she's weaving their shame. You nod your throat tight because you know this isn't just art. It's a statement, and Athena's not the type to take shade lightly. Let's anchor this with the fact in ancient Greece, tapestries weren't just decor. They were storytelling tools often used in temples or festivals to depict myths or glorify the gods. Arachne's choice to weave divine scandals flips this tradition on its head like graffiti on a sacred wall. And here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient texts like Ovid's Metamorphoses note that weavers sometimes hid secret messages in their work, using patterns only the initiated could read. You wonder if Arachne's tapestry has a hidden jab, a code in the threads mocking Athena's pride. You lean closer, but all you see is her skill, raw and fearless. Athena's loom, meanwhile, is a different beast. her tapestries emerging, and its flawless scenes of the gods' glory. Olympus shining, mortals bowing in awe. Her threads are silver and sapphire, so perfect they almost glow. You're torn between Arachne's fire and Athena's ice, their looms battling like a storm meeting a glacier. A kid tugs your sleeve, whispering, "Who's winning?" You shrug, honestly, it's too close to call. But you feel the weight of Athena's gaze not on Arachne, but on her tapestry, like she's reading every rebellious stitch. You want to nudge Arachne and say, maybe ease up on the god bashing, but she's lost in her work, her smirk sharp as a blade. Joke break, why's Arachne's tapestry so spicy? It's threadbare with drama. You chuckle, but the crowd's too tense to notice. The villagers are split, some cheer. Arachne's guts, others mutter prayers to Athena, clutching amulets like their life rafts. Historians still argue whether Arachne's tapestry was an act of genius or suicide. Was she a rebel artist or just a mortal, too proud to know her place? You're not sure, but you feel the clash, like the air's humming with it. You spot that old woman again, her eyes gleaming in the lamplight. The threads choose the weaver, she says, cryptic as ever. You shiver. Okay, Grandma, maybe save the riddles for later. You step back the workshop feeling smaller, like the walls are leaning in. Arachne's tapestry is nearly done, the god's scandals now framed by a border of thorny vines, like she's caging their sins. You swear you see Zeus's woven face scowl. Athena's work, though, is a masterpiece of order. Her gods are radiant, her mortals tiny and obedient. You're mesmerized, but there's a knot in your chest. Arachne's not just weaving cloth. She's weaving a challenge to the divine order, and Athena's answering with a vision of control. You glance between them, mortal and goddess, their hands moving like they're carving fate itself. Another joke to lighten the mood. What's Athena's tapestry style? Loom in airy perfection. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You notice a stray thread on the floor, gold like it fell from Arachne's shuttle. You're tempted to grab it like it's a piece of this moment, but you don't. Something tells you it's bad luck. The crowd's buzzing louder now. Bets flying, a jug of wine says Arachne's tapestry wins. A sheep says Athena's wrath will end this. You want to tell them to hush because the looms are speaking louder than any wager. You glance at Athena, her face unreadable, but her hands are relentless, her shuttle a blur. Arachne's not slowing either, her fingers dancing her tapestry, a riot of color and defiance. You're starting to see the difference. Athena's work is divine, untouchable. Arachne's is human, raw, alive. The villagers are whispering about the outcome, some saying, Arachne's already won, others saying, no mortal can outshine a goddess. You're not sure who's right, but you feel the moment building like a wave about to crash. The air's electric, the lamps flickering like they're nervous too. You lean against a wall, the stone cool against your back. Outside Hypepa's silent, the agora deserted, as everyone crams into the workshop. You hear a distant owl hoot, Athena's sacred bird maybe, and your skin prickles. The goddess's tapestry is almost complete, a vision of divine order that makes your eyes ache. Arachne's, though, is a firestorm. Her gods flawed, her mortals bold. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see whose story wins and what it'll cost. Because trust me, this duel's not just about cloth. It's about who gets to weave the truth. You're still crammed in Arachne's workshop, the air so heavy it's like breathing through wool. The duel between Arachne and Athena is at its peak, their looms hammering out a rhythm that drowns out the murmurs of the Hypepa crowd. You're wedged between a sweating merchant and a wide-eyed kid, your eyes darting between the tapestries taking shape. Arachne's weaving is a bold, chaotic masterpiece, exposing the gods' flaws with every thread, while Athena's is a pristine hymn to divine power. The tension's unbearable, like the moment before a storm breaks, and you can feel Athena's wrath building a cold fury that makes your skin prickle. You're not just watching a contest anymore, you're witnessing a reckoning. Arachne's tapestry is nearly done, and it's a gut punch. You see scenes of divine betrayal, Apollo tricking mortals, Aphrodite weaving lies each stitch, so vivid you almost hear the gods' whispers. Her colors are wild crimson, bleeding into gold vines, twisting like they're alive. You're stunned. She's not just weaving art, she's weaving a manifesto calling out the gods for their hypocrisy. The crowd split, some gasp in awe. Others clutch their amulets, muttering prayers. A weaver next to you hisses, "She's gone too far." You nod your throat tight because you know Athena's not going to let this slide. Remember how she turned that guy into a stag for less? Yeah, Arachne's walking a razor's edge. Let's drop a fact. In ancient Greece, weaving was a sacred act, often tied to rituals honoring Athena, who was seen as the ultimate weaver of fate and order. Temples like the one in Athens used tapestries to tell stories of divine glory, not to drag the gods through the mud. Arachne's work is like flipping the altar over. And here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient sources, like Pliny's Natural History, mention weavers using curse tablets to hex rivals before contests. You glance at Arachne's loom, half wondering if she's woven a curse into her threads, but all you see is her fierce focus, her hands moving like they're possessed. Athena's tapestry, meanwhile, is a vision of control. You catch glimpses, Olympus gleaming gods, radiant mortals, tiny and obedient. Her threads are silver and sapphire, so perfect they make your eyes ache. It's like she's weaving a law, a reminder of who's in charge. You're torn between Arachne's fire and Athena's ice, their looms battling like thunder against stone. A kid nearby whispers, "The goddess will win." You shrug maybe, but Arachne's holding her own, her tapestry, a rebellion in thread. You notice Athena's eyes flick to Arachne's work, and for a split second you see something: anger, jealousy. It's gone before you can be sure. Joke break, why's Athena so tense? Her threads are not amused. You smirk, but the crowd's too gripped to care. The villagers are whispering furiously now, some cheering Arachne's nerve, others begging Athena for mercy. Historians still argue whether Athena's wrath was justified or just divine ego. Was Arachne's tapestry a crime, or was Athena too thin-skinned to handle a mortal's talent? You're not sure, but you feel the goddess's anger like a cold wind snaking through the workshop. You spot that cryptic old woman again, her eyes glinting in the lamplight. The loom weaves the weaver's end, she mutters. You shiver. Okay, Grandma, enough with the omens. You edge closer, the heat of the crowd pressing in. Arachne's tapestry is complete now, a riot of color and truth gods expose mortals defiant. You swear you see Zeus's woven face scowl like he's about to step out and smite her. Athena's work is finished too, a flawless ode to divine order, every thread screaming power. The crowd falls silent, waiting for the judgment. Athena steps back, her face unreadable, and Arachne stands her chin high. Look, Arachne says, gesturing to her tapestry. Truth. Athena's eyes narrow, and you feel the air shift like the world's holding its breath. You want to yell, Arachne, run, but you're frozen, hooked on what comes next. Another joke to cut the tension. What's Arachne's vibe? Thread I call rebellion. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You notice a stray thread on the floor, crimson like a drop of blood from Arachne's loom. You're tempted to pick it up, but something stops you, like it's part of this moment, charged with fate. The villagers are betting again. A jug of wine, says Athena, strikes now. A goat says Arachne's work stands. You want to tell them to shut up because this isn't about bets anymore? It's about who owns the story. Athena raises a hand and the crowd gasps, expecting lightning or worse. But she just points to the tapestries, her voice cold. Choose. You glance between the two works, your heart pounding. Arachne's is alive, raw, a mirror to the gods' flaws. Athena's is perfect, untouchable, a command to bow. You're not sure who wins. Arachne's truth is undeniable, but Athena's power is crushing. The crowds whispering, some saying Arachne's tapestry is better, others too scared to speak. You feel the weight of the moment, like the threads are tying you to this clash. You're starting to see why Arachne's story endures, not just for her skill, but for her nerve, her refusal to kneel. The air's electric, the lamps flickering, and you know whatever happens next will shake Hypepa to its core. You lean against the wall, the stone grounding you as the tension peaks. Outside Hypepa's silent, the agora, a ghost town as everyone waits for Athena's verdict. You hear that owl hoot again, Athena's bird no doubt, and your skin crawls. Arachne's standing tall, her tapestry a blazing challenge, while Athena's looms like a divine edict. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how this ends and what price Arachne pays for her truth. Because trust me, the goddess's wrath is coming, and it's going to weave a fate nobody can unravel. You're still in Arachne's workshop, the air so thick with suspense it feels like you're wading through honey. The looms have gone silent, their clacking replaced by a hush that makes your ears ring. Arachne and Athena stand by their finished tapestries, two visions of the world, one raw and rebellious, the other divine and unyielding. The crowd's frozen eyes darting between the weaver and the goddess waiting for the verdict that could end this duel or end Arachne. You're close enough to see the sweat on Arachne's brow, the defiance in her stance, and the cold fire in Athena's eyes. The moment's here, and you know whatever happens next will ripple far beyond Hypepa's dusty streets. Arachne's tapestry is a blazing accusation, its threads weaving tales of divine misdeeds, gods seducing mortals, betraying trusts, leaving chaos in their wake. You see Europa's terror, as Zeus, a bull, carries her off. You feel the sailor's despair in Poseidon's storms. Her colors burn crimson gold, midnight blue, each stitch a dare to the gods to face their flaws. Athena's tapestry, though, is a masterpiece of order. Olympus shines, gods reign supreme. Mortals kneel in neat rows. Her threads are silver and sapphire, so perfect they seem to hum with power. You're torn, your heart pounding as you try to pick a winner. The crowd's whispering again, some saying, Arachne's work is better, others too, scared to breathe. Let's ground this with a fact. In ancient Greece, art was power. Tapestries like these weren't just hung for show. They were displayed in temples or at festivals to shape how people saw the gods. Arachne's choice to expose divine flaws is like rewriting a sacred text, dangerous and revolutionary. And here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient weavers, according to archaeological finds, used loom weights inscribed with insults to sabotage rivals. You glance at Arachne's loom, wondering if she slipped a cheeky jab into her threads. But all you see is her fierce focus, her tapestry, a mirror held up to Olympus. Athena steps forward, her chiton rustling like a whisper of frost. She studies Arachne's work, her face unreadable, but you catch a flicker anger maybe, or something deeper. Bold, she says, her voice sharp enough to cut. Arachne doesn't flinch. She lifts her chin, meeting the goddess's gaze. Truth, she replies. You want to applaud her guts, but also like, girl, maybe don't poke the immortal bear. The crowd gasps, some clutching amulets, others edging toward the door. You feel the air shift like a storm's about to break. Historians still argue whether Athena's reaction was about protecting divine honor or just petty jealousy. Was Arachne's truth too much, or was Athena too proud to share the spotlight? You're not sure, but the goddess's next move makes your blood run cold. Joke break, why is Athena so mad? Her ego's unraveling. You smirk, but the tension's too thick for laughs. Athena raises a hand, and the crowd flinches, expecting lightning or worse. Instead, she rips Arachne's tapestry from the loom, tearing it with a sound like breaking bones. You gasp those threads, that story gone in a heartbeat. Arachne stumbles back, her face pale, but her eyes blazing. You dare mock the gods. Athena's voice is a low growl, and you feel it in your bones. Before Arachne can answer, Athena strikes her with her shuttle. Not hard, but with a force that's more than physical. You see Arachne's form shimmer, her hands twisting, her body shrinking. The crowd screams, and you're frozen, watching her transform. She's not human anymore. You blink, trying to process it. Arachne's body is shrinking, legs sprouting, eyes multiplying. She's a spider now, dangling from a thread, her loom abandoned. You're horrified, but you can't look away. The crowd's in chaos, some weeping, others praying, a few running for the door. Athena stands tall, her tapestry untouched, her face calm but cold. We've now, mortal, she says. And you swear you hear a hint of regret. Arachne spider. Arachne sways on her thread, her new form glinting in the lamplight. You want to scream to undo this, but it's done. The goddess has spoken. Another joke to break the shock. What's Arachne's new gig? Web design. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You notice a stray thread on the floor, crimson like a remnant of Arachne's defiance. You're tempted to grab it, but you don't. It feels like stealing a piece of her soul. The villagers are scattering now, some cursing Arachne's pride, others whispering that Athena went too far. You spot that old woman again, her eyes soft now, almost sad. The gods weave cruelly, she murmurs. You nod your chest tight because you're starting to see the cost of Arachne's truth. You step outside the agora, dark and quiet, the air cool against your skin. Hypaepa feels different now, like it's lost something. You hear an owl hoot, Athena's bird mocking or mourning, you can't tell. The workshop's empty, except for Arachne's spider form scuttling across her ruined tapestry. You're not sure what to feel: anger at Athena, pity for Arachne, or awe at the story you just witnessed. The goddess is gone, her loom silent, her victory absolute. But Arachne's web, fragile as it is, feels like a quiet rebellion, a thread that won't break. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how Hypaepa lives with this curse. Because trust me, this story's far from over. You're standing outside Arachne's workshop, the agora of Hypaepa, cloaked in an uneasy silence, like the village is still reeling from Athena's wrath. The air's cool now, heavy with the scent of olive trees and regret. Inside, Arachne's gone, not the girl you watched weave rebellion, but a spider scuttling across the ruins of her tapestry. The crowds mostly fled, leaving whispers of fear and sorrow in their wake. You feel the weight of what just happened, like a stone in your chest, and you can't help but stare at that delicate web, glinting in the lamplight, a fragile echo of Arachne's defiance. The village is grieving, and you're right there with them, trying to make sense of a girl who dared too much and paid the ultimate price. You step back into the workshop, the floor littered with torn threads, crimson, gold, blue, like fragments of Arachne's lost story. Her loom stands silent, a ghost of its former rhythm, while her spider form weaves a tiny web in the corner, delicate but relentless. You're struck by the contrast. The girl who wove God's scandals is now spinning silk, her human voice silenced. The few villagers left are quiet, some weeping, others muttering about hubris. A baker with flour streaked hands shakes his head. She should have known better, he says. You want to argue she was brilliant, not foolish, but you feel the village's fear like a chill creeping through the walls. Let's anchor this with a fact in ancient Greek culture. Transformation myths like Arachne's were common, often serving as warnings about defying the gods. Stories like hers, found in texts like Ovid's Metamorphoses, showed mortals reshaped into animals or plants to teach humility or punish pride. Arachne's spider form is no random choice. It's a cruel nod to her weaving skill. And here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient Greeks believed spiders were omens, their webs seen as signs of divine favor or displeasure. You glance at Arachne's web, wondering if it's a curse or a quiet rebellion, each thread a middle finger to Athena's power. You wander closer to the ruined tapestry, its shredded scenes of divine betrayal still vivid despite the damage. You see Europa's woven face, her eyes wide with fear, and you feel a pang. Arachne's truth was too much for the gods to handle. A young girl nearby, clutching a doll, whispers, "Will she ever come back?" You shrug your throat tight because you know myths don't work that way. The villagers are starting to clean up, sweeping threads into piles, but it feels wrong, like erasing a piece of history. You spot that old woman again, her eyes soft but piercing. Her web holds her soul, she says, and you shiver. Okay, cryptic grandma, you're not helping the mood. Joke break, why's Arachne still weaving? She's got 8 reasons to keep going. You smirk, but the humor feels hollow in this heavy air. The villagers' grief is palpable, some blaming Arachne for tempting fate, others blaming Athena for her cruelty. Historians still argue whether this story is about punishing hubris or celebrating human creativity. Was Arachne's transformation a divine smackdown or a way to immortalize her defiance? You're not sure, but you feel the village's loss, like Hypepa's heart has been torn out with that tapestry. You step outside, the night air sharp against your skin. The agora's deserted now, torches flickering like they're mourning too. You hear an owl hoot, Athena's bird no doubt, and it feels like a taunt. The villagers who remain are whispering about what's next. Some say the gods will curse Hypepa for harboring Arachne. Others say her webs will protect them. You're not sure what to believe, but you notice a spider web glinting on a nearby stall, delicate and perfect. Is that her? You shake your head, probably not, but it makes you wonder. Arachne's gone, but her story's still here, woven into the village's bones. Another joke to lift the gloom. What's Arachne's new home? A web-solutely cozy corner. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You wander back to the workshop, drawn to that tiny web in the corner. It's small, but intricate, like Arachne's refusing to be forgotten. A merchant lingers nearby, his face pale. She was our pride, he says almost to himself. You nod, feeling the same. Hypepa's lost its star weaver, but her story's not over. It's in the whispers, the webs, the torn threads scattered like stars on the floor. You lean against the workshop wall, the stone cool and grounding. The village feels different now, quieter, like it's waiting for something. You glance at Arachne's spider form still spinning, and you're struck by her persistence. She's not human anymore, but she's still weaving, still telling her story in silk. You're starting to see why her tale endures, not just for the tragedy, but for the spark that refuses to die. The crowd's gone now, leaving you alone with the web and the silence. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how Hypepa carries this wound and what Arachne's legacy becomes. Because trust me, her threads are still pulling at the world. You're wandering through Hypepa's quiet streets, the village still cloaked in the shadow of Arachne's transformation. The agora, once buzzing with merchants and bets, feels like a ghost town, its stalls half empty, under a gray dawn. You can't shake the image of Arachne, spider Arachne, spinning her delicate web in the corner of her abandoned workshop. The air smells of dust and faded olive blossoms, and the villagers move slowly, their faces heavy with grief and fear. You're drawn to the whispers of Arachne's legacy, how her story is already weaving itself into myths that stretch beyond this small town. You're here to trace those threads, to see how her defiance echoes in tales told far and wide. You pass a group of weavers huddled near a fountain, their voices low. They're talking about Arachne, not as a girl they knew, but as a legend, a warning, a hero, a tragedy. Her webs are everywhere now, one says, pointing to a glistening strand on a nearby olive tree. You squint and sure enough, it's there. Fragile but perfect, catching the morning light. You wonder if it's just a spider or something more like Arachne's spirit refusing to fade. The weaver's words paint a picture, her story spreading, carried by traders to Ephesus, Athens, even across the sea to Egypt. You feel a shiver, her loom silent, but her defiance is alive. Let's ground this with a fact. In ancient Greece, myths like Arachne's traveled fast often through oral storytelling at festivals or markets. Texts like Ovid's Metamorphoses, written centuries later in Rome, show how Greek tales reached distant cultures blending with local legends. Arachne's story, with its mix of hubris and artistry, was perfect for retelling a cautionary tale that doubled as inspiration. And here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient Mediterranean cultures, like those in Crete, revered spiders as symbols of creation, their webs linked to goddesses like Ariadne. You glance at that web again, wondering if Arachne's curse is also her immortality, her silk, a new kind of tapestry. You drift toward the workshop, now deserted, except for a stray cat nosing through the debris. Arachne's ruined tapestry lies in tatters, but you notice villagers have salvaged some threads, crimson and gold like relics. A young boy nearby clutches one, whispering, "It's hers." You smile, but it's bittersweet. Arachne's gone yet. Her work lingers like a ghost. You overhear a merchant telling a traveler, "She wove the god's secrets, so Athena made her a spider." The traveler's eyes widen, and you know he'll carry that tale home, adding his own spin. You're starting to see how myths grow, each retelling a new thread in Arachne's web. Joke break, why's Arachne's story spreading? It's web virally catchy. You smirk, but the village's mood is too heavy for laughs. The weavers by the fountain are debating now, some saying Arachne's pride doomed her, others calling her a martyr for truth. Historians still argue whether her myth was a Greek original or borrowed from older tales like those of Near Eastern weaver goddesses. Was Arachne's story a warning against hubris or a celebration of human daring? You're not sure, but you feel her presence in Hypepa like a whisper in the wind. You pause by the workshop door, noticing a new web spanning the frame, intricate as Arachne's old tapestries. You're tempted to touch it, but you don't. It feels sacred, like a piece of her soul. A woman nearby, her hands dyed indigo size. She's still weaving in her way. You nod your chest tight because you're starting to believe it. The villagers are changing too. Some avoid the workshop, calling it cursed. Others leave offerings, bits of wool or figs at its threshold. You spot a clay loom weight, etched with a spider left like a prayer. It's strange, but it makes sense. Arachne's no longer just a girl. She's a story, a symbol. Another joke to lighten the gloom. What's Arachne's legacy? A thread endless tale. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You wander back to the agora, where a bard's strumming a lyre, singing a new song about a weaver who challenged the gods. The crowd's small but rapt, and you catch lines about threads of truth and a spider's silent song. You're impressed this guy's good, and he's weaving Arachne into something bigger, a myth that'll outlive Hypepa's mud brick walls. You feel a pang knowing she'll never hear it, never know how her story's growing. You lean against a stall, the wood rough under your hands. The village is waking up, but it's different now, quieter, like it's lost its spark. You hear an owl hoot in the distance, Athena's bird, and it feels like a reminder of who won. But then you see another web, this one on a potter's wheel, its silk catching the sun like gold. You're starting to wonder if Arachne's really gone, or if she's out there in every web, every tale. The bard's song fades and the crowd disperses, but you stay hooked on the idea that her defiance is spreading thread by thread across time and seas. You glance back at the workshop, its dark doorway like a portal to her story. Hypepa's mourning, but it's also changing, weaving Arachne into its heart. You're caught in her web too, aren't you? Ready to see how her myth takes root, how it shapes the world beyond this village. Because trust me, Arachne's threads are far from broken, they're just beginning to spread. You're drifting through Hypepa's winding streets, the village settling into a strange new rhythm under the weight of Arachne's transformation. The morning sun casts long shadows, and the air carries the faint hum of looms starting up again, though none match the fire of Arachne's. Her workshop sits quiet, a shrine of sorts, with webs glinting in its corners like echoes of her lost tapestries. You're caught in the village's shift, watching how Arachne's story weaves itself into the fabric of their lives. Art rituals, whispered tales. It's not just Hypepa anymore. Her legends creeping into the wider world, shaping how people see gods, mortals, and the threads that bind them. You're here to follow those threads, to see how her defiance lives on in ancient art and storytelling. You pause by a potter's stall, where clay vessels are etched with spider motifs, delicate webs curling around rims, a nod to Arachne's fate. The potter, a grizzled man with clay-caked hands, catches you staring. For her, he says, nodding toward the workshop, she's still with us. You nod, feeling a chill, because it's true. Arachne's story is everywhere, seeping into the village's art like dye into wool. You notice weavers nearby, their looms, slower now, their patterns mimicking her style. Bold colors, daring scenes. They're not just making cloth, they're keeping her alive, thread by thread. Let's ground this with a fact. In ancient Greece, art was a mirror of myth, with pottery, textiles, and sculptures often depicting stories like Arachne's to teach or inspire. Vases from the 5th century BCE found in places like Athens show weavers or spiders alongside gods, hinting at her tale's spread. Her story wasn't just a cautionary tale. It was a spark for artists to explore human defiance. And here's the quirky tidbit. Some Greek vases feature spider-women hybrid figures that might echo Arachne's transformation, blending mortal and myth in eerie designs. You glance at the potter's work, wondering if he's channeling that ancient vibe, his webs a quiet tribute. You wander toward the agora's edge, where a group of women are weaving under an olive tree, their looms clacking softly. One tapestry catches your eye, a scene of a spider weaving a web, its threads shimmering like Arachne's old work. It's for the festival. A weaver explains her hands stained indigo, to honor her. You're surprised to honor a girl who defied a goddess. But you get it. Arachne's not just a cautionary tale here. She's a symbol of courage of art that speaks truth. You overhear a bard nearby, his lyre strumming a tale of a weaver turned spider, and the crowd's rapt, some nodding, others wiping tears. Her story's becoming ritual woven into Hypepa's soul. Joke break, why is Arachne's art immortal? It's webtastically unforgettable. You smirk, but the village's reverence keeps the mood heavy. The weavers are debating now, some saying Arachne's webs are blessings, others calling them warnings. Historians still argue whether her story inspired Greek artists or was shaped by them. Did her myth birth those spider motifs, or did older tales feed into hers? You're not sure, but you feel her influence in the air, like a thread connecting past to present. You notice a kid nearby sketching a web in the dirt with a stick, and you smile. She's already part of the next generation's art. You drift back to the workshop, drawn by its quiet pull. Inside, the air's still, but webs crisscross the rafters, delicate and defiant. You spot a villager leaving a small offering, a skein of crimson wool, at the threshold. For her courage, he mutters, and you nod your chest tight. Arachne's story is reshaping Hypepa's art, from pottery to textiles, turning her into something more than a girl. You see it in the weaver's bold patterns, the potter's spider etchings, even the bard songs. Her defiance is a spark igniting creations that challenge the gods' tidy narratives. Another joke to ease the weight. What's Arachne's art style? Spin-tacular realism. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You step outside the village, alive with small acts of tribute, webs left untouched, threads tucked into shrines. You hear an owl hoot, Athena's bird, and it feels less like a taunt now, more like a grudging acknowledgement. Arachne's story is spreading, carried by traders, bards, and artists to places like Corinth and Delphi. You imagine her tale on a vase in Athens, a weaver's loom in Crete, each retelling a new thread in her web. You lean against a wall, the stone warm under the midday sun. Hypepa is finding its rhythm again, but it's different. Arachne's absence is a wound, but her legacy is a fire. You notice a weaver's apprentice practicing a pattern that mimics Arachne's thorny vines, bold as her lost tapestry. You're starting to see how her story lives, not just in Hypepa, but in every piece of art that dares to question power. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how her myth grows, how it weaves into the world's stories. Because trust me, Arachne's threads are stretching far beyond this village, and they're nowhere near done. You're lingering in Hypepa's agora, the village pulsing with a quiet intensity as Arachne's story settles into its bones. The sun's high now, bleaching the dirt streets, but the air feels heavy, like it's carrying the weight of her transformation. Webs glint on stalls and olive trees, each one a reminder of the girl who dared to weave truth against a goddess. You're drawn to the debate swirling around her, villagers, traders, even priests arguing over what her fate means. Was it justice, cruelty, a warning, or a triumph? You're here to dive into that question, to unravel why Athena's wrath and Arachne's hubris still spark heated words, even as her web spread across Hypepa's heart. You pause by a group of elders near a temple, their voices sharp as they debate under a faded statue of Athena. One, a priest with a beard like tangled wool, insists Arachne's pride was a sin, a slap to the goddess's honor. Mortals must know their place, he says, clutching an owl-shaped amulet. But a weaver nearby, her hands dyed crimson, snaps back. Athena feared her skill. You raise an eyebrow, bold, take lady. The argument's heated, and you feel the divide. Some see Arachne as a reckless fool, others as a hero who spoke truth to power. You're caught in the middle, wondering who's right, or if right even matters when a goddess swings the hammer. Let's ground this with a fact. In ancient Greek culture, hubris, excessive pride, was a serious offense, often punished by the gods to maintain cosmic order. Stories like Arachne's, found in texts like Ovid's Metamorphoses, were moral lessons warning mortals not to overstep their bounds. But here's the quirky tidbit: some ancient philosophers, like those in Plato's dialogues, suggested hubris wasn't always bad. It could be a spark of human greatness, defying limits. You glance at a nearby web, its silk catching the sun, and wonder if Arachne's pride was her downfall or her glory. Was she too bold, or was Athena too brittle? You wander toward the workshop where a small crowd lingers, staring at Arachne's abandoned loom. A young man, maybe a poet, is scribbling on a clay tablet, muttering about justice versus genius. You lean closer, catching his words. Athena wove control. Arachne wove truth. You nod, impressed. He's onto something. The debate's everywhere now, from the agora to the temple steps. A merchant argues Arachne's tapestry was better, her flaws human, her art alive. A priestess counters that Athena's perfection was divine, untouchable. You feel the tension like a thread stretched to breaking. Historians still argue whether Athena's punishment was fair or a divine overreach. Was she protecting order or silencing a rival? You're not sure, but you're hooked on the question. Joke break: why's Athena so touchy? Her ego's threadbare. You smirk, but the debate's too intense for laughs. You notice a spider web on the workshop door, intricate and bold, like Arachne still throwing shade. The villagers are split, some leave offerings of wool at the threshold, calling her a martyr. Others spit and call her cursed. You overhear a girl say, "She showed the gods lies." Her friend shushes her, glancing at the temple. You get it. Arachne's story is dangerous. A spark that could burn the neat lines between mortal and divine. You step into the workshop, the air cool and quiet. Arachne's torn tapestry lies in scraps, but you see villagers salvaging threads, weaving them into their own work, crimson streaks in a shawl, gold in a blanket. It's like they're keeping her alive piece by piece. You spot that old woman again, her eyes sharp as she watches the crowd. Justice is a goddess's word, she says, but truth is a weaver's. You shiver. Okay, Grandma, you're dropping truth bombs now. You're starting to see why Arachne's story sticks. It's not just about her. It's about what happens when human daring meets divine pride. Another joke to ease the tension. What's Arachne's lesson? Don't weave the gods angry. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You drift back to the agora, where the debate's growing louder. A bard's joined in singing of a weaver who wove too well, her spider form a curse and a crown. You notice his audience, kids weavers, even a skeptical priest hanging on every word. Arachne's story is becoming a lens, a way to question the gods' fairness. You feel it too, this pull to pick a side, to decide if Athena's wrath was justice or jealousy. You lean against a stall, the wood warm under your hands. The village is alive with this debate, each voice a thread in Arachne's growing myth. You see a potter etching a spider onto a vase, its web bold and defiant. You're starting to get it. Arachne's not just a story. She's a challenge, a question that won't fade. Was her hubris a crime, or was Athena's punishment a tantrum? The sun dips lower, casting webs in sharp relief, and you hear that owl hoot again. Athena's bird watching. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how Arachne's defiance lives on beyond Hypaepa's debates. Because trust me, her threads are weaving something bigger than this village can hold. You're back in Hypaepa's agora. the village humming with a restless energy as Arachne's story ripples beyond its mud brick walls. The midday sun glints off spider webs draped across stalls and olive branches, each one a silent nod to the girl who wove truth and paid for it. The debates about her hubris and Athena's justice still simmer, but now you're drawn to something new. How Arachne's defiance lives on in the art and stories of today, not just ancient vases or village looms. Her shadow stretches into modern creations, from paintings to poems, a symbol of rebellion against power. You're here to chase that echo, to see how a spider's thread from Hypepa weaves into the world you know. You pause by a weaver's stall, where a young woman is crafting a shawl, with a web-like pattern, its threads bold and crimson like Arachne's lost tapestry. For her, she says, catching your gaze. She's still teaching us. You nod, struck by how Arachne's story feels alive. Not just a myth, but a spark for anyone who dares to challenge the status quo. You think of modern artists, painters, writers, even filmmakers who've drawn on her tale, turning her into a rebel icon. Her story's not stuck in Hypepa. It's in galleries, books, maybe even that edgy mural you saw in a city back home. Let's ground this with a fact. Arachne's myth has inspired art for centuries. From Renaissance paintings to 19th century poetry, often portraying her as a tragic genius. Works like Gustave Doré's engravings for Ovid's Metamorphoses show her transformation with haunting detail, her spider form a symbol of creativity cursed. And here's the quirky tidbit. In Victorian England, some women's weaving guilds adopted Arachne as a mascot, seeing her as a patron of their craft despite her fate. You glance at the weaver's shawl, its web pattern fierce, and wonder if she knows her work echoes those long-ago rebels. You wander through the agora, noticing how Arachne's influence lingers in Hypepa's art pottery with spider etchings, tapestries with daring colors. It's like the village is a canvas for her legacy. You overhear a bard singing a new verse, one that feels modern. She wove the truth, though gods forbade. Her web's a fire that won't fade. You're impressed his words could fit a protest song today. Arachne as a voice for those who speak out and get slapped down. You think of how her story's been reimagined, novels where she's a feminist hero, films where her spider form is a quiet triumph. She's not just ancient, she's now. Joke break, why's Arachne trending? Her story's webolutionary. You smirk, but the village's reverence keeps the mood deep. The weavers are talking now, some saying, Arachne's myth inspires them to weave boldly, others fearing her fate. Historians still argue whether her story's a warning or a celebration. Did it caution artists to stay humble or urge them to defy power? You're not sure, but you feel her in Hypepa's art in the way a potter's spider vase glints with defiance, like it's daring Athena to look. You drift toward the workshop, its doorway dark but alive with webs. Inside a villager's left, a new offering, a skein of gold thread glowing in the dust. You're struck by the gesture. Arachne's gone, but her stories amuse, pushing people to create. You think of modern parallels, artists censored for their work, writers banned for their truths, yet still weaving their own webs. Arachne's not just a myth. She's a mirror for anyone who risks it all for their art. You notice a kid nearby weaving a tiny web from grass blades and smile. She's already caught in Arachne's spell. Another joke to lighten the vibe. What's Arachne's modern gig? Thread fluencer supreme. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You step outside the agora, bustling again, but with a new edge. Villagers are bolder, their art fiercer, like Arachne's given them permission to push back. You hear an owl hoot, Athena's bird, and it feels less like a taunt, now more like a challenge. You think of how Arachne's story lives in today's world, in a poem about defiance, a painting of a spider weaving stars, even a tweet calling out power. Her threads are everywhere, pulling at the edges of control. You lean against a stall, the wood warm under your hands. Hipepa's alive with Arachne's shadow, its art a quiet rebellion. You see a weaver's apprentice practicing a pattern that mimics her lost tapestry. Thorny vines, bold and unapologetic. You're starting to get it. Arachne's not just a story. She's a force, a call to create, no matter the cost. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how her myth weaves into the sacred, how it shapes rituals and beliefs. Because trust me, her threads are spinning something bigger than art alone. You're weaving through Hypepa's sunlit streets, the village alive with the hum of looms and the faint glint of spider webs in every corner. Arachne's story has seeped into the agora's art and debates, but now you're drawn to something deeper, how her tale intertwines with the sacred, the rituals and myths that give weaving its divine pulse. The air smells of incense and wool, and you catch villagers glancing at webs with a mix of awe and unease, like their offerings to a lost goddess. You're here to unravel how Arachne's defiance and her spider form have spun into the sacred crafts of ancient Greece, threading her legacy into rituals that honor the divine and the human. You pause by a small shrine at the agora's edge, where a clay statue of Athena stands, her owl perched on her shoulder. A weaver's left, an offering, a skein of crimson thread, a nod to Arachne's lost tapestry. For both a woman nearby whispers, her hand stained with dye. The goddess and the girl. You raise an eyebrow. Arachne sacred, but you get it, her stories become a ritual. Her webs a bridge between mortal craft and divine power. You notice a web glistening above the shrine, delicate but bold, and you wonder if it's Arachne's way of claiming space in Athena's shadow. Let's ground this with a fact. In ancient Greece, weaving was a sacred act often tied to Athena, who was revered as the goddess of crafts and wisdom. Temples like the Parthenon housed looms, where priestesses wove sacred peplos robes for festivals symbolizing divine order. Arachne's challenge flipped that script, making her a kind of anti-priestess. And here's the quirky tidbit: some Greek rituals involved web offerings, spider's silk, left at shrines to invoke protection or creativity, possibly echoing myths like Arachne's. You glance at the shrine's web, wondering if it's just a spider's work or a quiet prayer to her legacy. You wander toward a group of women weaving under an olive tree, their looms clacking softly. They're crafting a cloth for an upcoming festival, its pattern laced with web-like designs. For Arachne, one says, her voice low, like she's half afraid Athena's listening. You're struck by the reverence. Her story's not just art or debate. It's ritual, a way to honor human skill in a world ruled by gods. You overhear a priestess nearby chanting softly as she weaves her words, invoking both Athena and the weaver who dared. You're starting to see it. Arachne's myth is a sacred thread tying mortal defiance to divine craft. Joke break, why's Arachne's web sacred? It's thread vinely inspired. You smirk, but the village's solemn mood keeps it heavy. The weavers are debating now, some saying Arachne's curse makes her a cautionary tale, others calling her a patron of bold creation. Historians still argue whether her myth sanctified weaving or warned against challenging the gods. Was she a rebel who tainted a sacred craft, or a spark that made it human? You're not sure, but you feel her in the air, her story woven into every ritual thread. You drift back to the workshop, its doorway now, a shrine of sorts draped with webs and offerings. Wool loom waits, even a tiny clay spider. Inside the air's still, but you sense Arachne's presence in the silence. Her webs a testament to her unending craft. You notice a villager weaving a small cloth nearby, its pattern mimicking Arachne's thorny vines. It's for the temple, she says, to show we're not afraid. You nod your chest tight because this is more than art. It's worship, a ritual that keeps Arachne's fire alive. Another joke to lighten the mood. What's Arachne's ritual role? Web priestess extraordinaire. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You step outside the agora alive with preparations for the festival. Looms humming, priestesses chanting webs left untouched as offerings. You hear an owl hoot, Athena's bird, and it feels like a grudging nod to Arachne's place in this sacred dance. Her story's not just in Hipepa's rituals. It's in every weave that dares to tell a truth, every thread that challenges power. You lean against a stall, the wood warm under your hands. The village feels like a loom itself, weaving Arachne into its sacred heart. You see a child leave a tiny web-shaped braid at the shrine, and you smile, she's part of this too, carrying Arachne's spark. You're starting to get it. Her myth isn't just about punishment, it's about creation, about how even a cursed weaver can become sacred. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to see how her final thread ties this all together, how her story endures. Because, trust me, Arachne's webs are spinning something eternal. You're standing in Hipepa's agora, the village pulsing with a quiet reverence, as Arachne's story weaves its final threads into the fabric of this place. The late afternoon sun casts golden webs across stalls and rooftops, each one a silent testament to the girl who dared to challenge Athena. Her workshop looms nearby, a shrine of webs and memories, while the village hums with rituals and art that carry her name. You're here to reflect on her enduring symbol, to see how Arachne weaver Rebel Spider has become more than a myth, a spark that burns in every act of defiance and creation. Her story's not just Hipepa's anymore. It's a universal thread tying past to present, mortal to divine. You pause by a weaver's stall where an old woman is crafting a tapestry with a spider at its center, its web shimmering in crimson and gold. For Arachne, she says, her voice soft but firm, like she's speaking a prayer. You nod, feeling the weight of her words. Arachne's not just a cautionary tale. She's a symbol of courage, of art that refuses to bow. You see her influence everywhere, in the potter's vases etched with webs, in the songs of bards who call her a hero, in the quiet offerings left at her workshop. She's become a beacon, a reminder that even a cursed weaver can change the world. Let's ground this with a fact. In ancient Greece, myths like Arachne's were more than stories. They were cultural touchstones shaping how people viewed creativity, pride, and divine power. Her tale, preserved in texts like Ovid's Metamorphoses, inspired generations to question authority through art. And here's the quirky tidbit: in some ancient Greek communities, spiders were seen as oracles, their webs read for signs of fate, possibly tying to Arachne's transformation as a symbol of enduring creation. You glance at a nearby web, its silk catching the sun, and wonder if it's her still weaving her defiance into the world. You wander toward the workshop, drawn by its quiet pull. Inside, webs drape the rafters like delicate tapestries, and you notice a new offering, a clay loom weight carved with a spider left by a villager who's gone. She's our muse. A young weaver nearby says, her hands busy with a bold pattern of thorny vines echoing Arachne's lost work. You're struck by how her story lives, not just in Hipepa, but in every artist who dares to speak truth, every creator who risks divine or mortal wrath. Her symbol endures, a spider spinning against the odds, a thread that won't break. Joke break, wise Arachne eternal. Her webs are thread forever. You smirk, but the village's reverence keeps the mood deep. The agora's alive with her legacy weavers crafting bolder designs, bards singing of a girl who wove truth, even kids drawing webs in the dust. Historians still argue whether Arachne's story is a warning or a rallying cry. Was she punished for hubris or immortalized for her courage? You're not sure, but you feel her in every web, every bold stroke of art, every story that challenges power. You step outside the sun, dipping low, casting long shadows that make the webs glow like fire. You hear an owl hoot, Athena's bird always watching, and it feels like a nod, not a taunt. Arachne's story has woven her into something bigger, a symbol of defiance of art as rebellion of humanity's refusal to stay small. You think of how her myth lives today, in poems about standing up, paintings of spiders weaving stars, even protests where creators fight for their voice. She's not just Hypepa's, she's everyone's, a thread connecting every soul who dares to create. Another joke to lighten the vibe. What's Arachne's final act? A webtacular legacy. You're not laughing, but you're still here, right? You lean against a stall, the wood warm under your hands. The village is settling into dusk, but Arachne's presence is everywhere, in the weaver's bold cloth, the potter's spider vase, the bard's defiant song. You see a child leave a tiny braid of wool at the workshop door, a quiet offering to a girl who became a myth. You're starting to get it. Arachne's not gone. She's eternal. Her web's a symbol of creation that outlives any curse. You glance back at the workshop, its doorway dark but alive with meaning. Hypepa's changed its heart, woven with Arachne's threads. Defiance, art, truth. You feel it too, this pull to carry her story forward, to see how her symbol shapes the world beyond these streets. You're hooked, aren't you? Ready to let her final thread linger, to see how her legacy spins into eternity. Because, trust me, Arachne's webs are still weaving, and they're pulling you into their delicate, unbreakable dance.